Just my style. All right, yeah. So for round three of the Canadian Open, we have Do-Yup Kim playing white versus Jinwei Bin as black. And if anybody doesn't know these players, Jinwei Bin is from my understanding, he's a Japanese seven dan who's I think also coming to Go Congress this year, right? I think he is.
I think so,
I'm
yeah.
unsure. But I think I saw his name on the list because I was trying to guess who the Japanese seven dan was that everyone kept mentioning, and so I think it's him. Uh, and Do-Young Kim is I actually consider our enemy at this point because he keeps coming over to the Western countries and taking our titles and winning our tournaments. And well, he won his first tournament here in the U.S. and Chicago. Um, but he's very popular in Europe because he always wins in them. But yeah, so but yeah, let's without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the game. I don't want to spend too much time going through the opening, but we'll see if anything interesting happens or if anything unique stands out. Um, but yeah, um, ooh, okay. So we can see that we go straight into a variation that I actually really dislike. Uh, Uniquely in my house, one of my roommates really likes the avalanche, and so this can be a very terrifying variation that I don't actually know all the way through. So I won't play it out because I did this in my game against my roommate, and it's very bad. But yeah, uh, and so I thought we might get to see that, especially when black is extending here, but it looks like white decides to back off and not go into the complicated variations because here, if white were to play here, this would lead into basically the large avalanche, um, which are more variations that are really complicated. But we have the more stable, the more less complicated variation today, just dropping down and taking a nice solid result. And black instantly plays away. This is also actually a really interesting move. I know I said we shouldn't spend too much time on the opening, but we are actually getting quite an interesting opening. We kind of see that there's been a bit of what we would call kind of an unfinished position here. Um, and I know a lot of people have trouble with this when it comes to being like, I see professional players all the time breaking Joseki. When should I do that? And sometimes a good position can be when you feel comfortable. Basically, when you can't be punished in a large way. So, for example, if black were to play away right now, one thing that I like to preach is we generally don't want our opponent to hane at the head and butt of our stones here. We generally don't want to allow white to do something like this and get like a double hane, and this can be really, really difficult to play against as black. And there's all kinds of weaknesses at the center point here of the three stones, and so there's generally a lot of weaknesses when you are playing away at this point. And so what happens is black says, okay, I don't need to extend because if I keep extending, I'm just going to be giving white more territory on the bottom. Um, and it's also possible that white might even just choose to play away themselves because maybe they're not just happy with the territory. Maybe they might play up top. But also, generally, black is just now comfortable. They don't really have to worry about the double hane to the same capacity with the same issues that you would normally have. But what's even more interesting is black actually chooses to go into uh, Sanrense, which actually plays back to the fact that he's, a Japanese seven dan pressure, right? We kind of see the wall building up here, going into this kind of framework thing or influence, and then we get into Senrensei, which is very very Japanese like, and again played into that Japanese style, we already know instantly what black is going for. And this is actually something that's really important to know when you are playing against anybody. Anytime you're playing somebody, and this is something that that I work on with my students as well, is identifying what your opponent is doing before they do it. So mainly with my DDK and SDK students, we are trying to identify when the opponent is trying to kill or attack them, rather than building. But it is really important to see here that when black plays this move, you instantly know what black is doing. Generally, you should know what black is doing here, but if they play this, you really know what they're going for. They are going for that, that big moyo, that influence, that territory, right? They're going for that large portion of the board, and that can help you when you are choosing what you should be doing next. Um, but yeah, pretty basic though. You generally don't want to go too crazy. One thing you don't want to do is like obviously go jump in here right now. You have to accept to some extent that black is choosing to take territory and they are giving some exchanges, and just playing a simple Joseki is perfectly fine. And black is going to continue to say, hey, I'm just going to build. I'm not particularly behind or anything. Black is also building, or white is also building. Pretty simple. But black does decide to go for the cut here. And so that kind of ends the battle of basically who's going to be building more between the two. Um, which is actually really annoying to me. I actually kind of hate these kinds of games because I'm not very good at counting. So if I'm expected to be like, I've got more than you, I don't have to be the one that cuts. It can be really rough. But Black says, I know that if I keep pushing, the game will probably not go the way I want. So Black chooses to cut, especially when once again, you have the power of the Hane at the head of 2 and the Hane at the butt of 2. So Black says that they have an advantage here when it comes to liberties versus we can see with Black's 2 stones, we have the Hane at the head, but we don't have the Hane at the butt. And so this is a perfect time for Black to be able to cut. This one might be really interesting to some people as well, because some people might ask why not just here, but this is because we don't want to allow white to play this Hane. So sometimes when you want to get ahead of the race, you can play this, and this is what is really good for that Hane at the head of 2 and at the butt, because now we can see that if white tries to push through, it ends up going into a problem where we now are in Atari here if we're not careful. So if we tried to push through here, we would be letting black take these 2 stones, and this would just be really painful. But suddenly we become ahead in the race, like we're always ahead. And so this would be pushing from behind as white. We're pushing from behind is where black has the lead. However, on the flip side, white can also eventually play this Atari, and vice versa. Black could eventually choose to say, hey, I'm going to go here to prevent the Atari, that important Atari, because maybe black will need to make the eyes down here. And so this is a really good technique to be able to do that when you have both this Hane at the head and butt of 2 stones. And this sometimes can also apply to 3 stones. And so those are really important shapes that you want to be able to look for. This is an interesting attachment. I'm not sure how I feel about this attachment actually. I guess what is probably saying that uh they don't want to be kind of shut out of this area, because they, basically they are establishing, what are black's chances of living, and if black lives here while at the same time getting here, this could be very, a very difficult game for white, right? And so White is saying, okay, you're probably gonna live here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and jump into the side right now. I'm not gonna wait. I'm just gonna go over here right now. And then Black goes ahead and continues to make sure that they're alive here. Here, something interesting that I actually thought about, which is really bad, but something that I did think about when I was looking back at the game, is that if we play like this, black actually does have to come back and defend the cut, because if we allow that cut to happen, basically, um, white will end up killing the 3 stones or cutting off these other 3 stones, and I don't think that black can live down here. So so I did think about what would happen if white played this empty triangle, but I think the idea is that at the end of the day, black's still going to have to come back here at some point anyway, and it probably isn't worth it to give black the shape here and take away all the end game points here. Basically, we don't want to make our corner really small, really tiny, right? Um, so there's a lot of reasons why we wouldn't want to play that way, but I could see the benefit in taking the sente as well. Uh, maybe force black to come back and fix, and we get to come over here and maybe launch an attack on this group. It was kind of what I was thinking, but I think it is a little greedy. So, um, and we can kind of see that here as well, where black did end up having to come back here anyway. Because white is starting to surround. And one thing that you always want to do and consider, because there's a big misconception with running versus living, you don't want to make white really strong over here and end up like running your eyeballs out, right? And end up making white stronger here as well. And then end up having to come back and live with a group that is strong throughout your opponent's territory and only live with like maybe 1 or 2 points, well, it can't be 1 point, but 2 or 3 points, right? And so black is saying, I'm just gonna come back and make sure that I've got my eye space now. That way, if I do have to run out, I can bail and be like, hey, I'm alive down here, I've got points, and I don't have to unnecessarily make this white group all that stronger, right? Um, but white goes for the territory here instead of kind of surrounding and attacking. But I will say, like, once black attaches here, I think it's pretty obvious that white's going to have to bail on the attack, because it is very hard um, to hold the attack here. But now we are set for white having to escape here, and white definitely is going to feel very uncomfortable. And what's really cool and something that I really love about top play, and it's something that I'm starting to get better at myself, is that you'll see black comes back and fixes their shape with a dog nose. Uh, Again, something that can happen is players get really lost in the sauce, basically. um, they get really lost in kills and they tunnel vision, right? So we're looking at this group, and a lot of players are like, well, why not just take this jump and continuously surround this white group here, or maybe like go here and again continuously surround while trying to build the right side somehow. But black says, hey, I've got a weakness here. I've got a cutting point, right? I've got this cutting point, and I don't want that to be a problem later. And I think it's, if I try to attack this while having this weak point, I'm going to run into this issue where I have tons of weak points, right? Like, what are the chances of us actually killing this group? So black goes back and fixes their weaknesses. And one really good question with this as well is that black also says, hey, if you also play away, I can go ahead and reduce the left side as well. Go is basically a game of trades, and so I think this is dog nose here. This dog face is actually a really good, asking thing, right? It's like, hey, I'm fixing my weaknesses, but I'm also going to say, can I benefit a little from this if I'm not going to get to attack this group? And so one thing here we might see from white is that they defend the left side, which is what they choose to do. And they choose to do it with the iron pillar, which I think is really interesting. And I think it's actually a really cool move as well, because here we can see that we might get some weaknesses and stuff that could happen with some of these kinds of weird moves like this one. Um, or maybe even just like this knight's move here as well to kind of go ahead and press down on this also. Not really that big kind of minuscule, but I think is probably something one of the reasons why White led with this move rather than playing kind of like this diagonal. But White could also go ahead and try to go over here and surround this and work on reinforcing this and give up a little bit on the left side. But I think White decided that they're going to have a bloodthirsty game anyway. And that's the Do-Yup style, bloodthirsty games. So he is ready to run and fight with this group. And he did end up going for the shape, the just the simple jump here. And we can see Black also answered with the nose. Okay, really solid by Black. Again, Black just kind of shoring up those weaknesses, right? He's not getting greedy with it. He's saying, hey, I've got a weakness over here with this group. I'm not going to try to get a leg up on my opponent. I'm not going to try to do anything, you know, extra here. I'm just going to make sure that I'm going to end up with a group that can have two eyes. And a lot of people might see this as slow, but it's actually a really, really strong. It is very, very strong. Um, it's almost like beating your opponent with kindness. um, and so we can kind of see White's a little uncomfortable here. So Black is trying to, so White is trying to kind of utilize crosscuts, forcing moves, attachments to basically become more comfortable in terms of shape. Um, but at the same time, it's strengthening Black as well. And Black seems to be super willing to just be able to take those, However, we can see White is willing to completely trade off these 4 stones. So if White plays here, one thing that Black can decide to do is to play here to cut off these stones. Um, but is it enough? Um, I'm gonna hit score estimator because I can't count. Uh, so it seems that if we were to play here, it would actually be beneficial for White. So Black doesn't actually have time to go back to kill these stones because even though they look really, really big, it seems that that's just not enough. Because if we play here, White would obviously just sacrifice them. White would never, try to come back here to save them because he's already resolved that they're going to die. And he'd probably play somewhere at the top side. And so Black says, I think this is the bigger side of the board. And one of the ways that we can actually think about this corner and kind of come to the conclusion that this is where we should be playing is really simple: corner, side, center. And now this won't apply all the time. Obviously, there's going to be sometimes where you kill your opponent in a really big way. But when you have an open corner like this, where your opponent can approach it, it is actually really big, and it can be misunderstood as really small, but an approach like this can be really big, even in the mid game like this. And so Black says, I think that I'd rather have my solid corner rather than capturing these stones. And it's always a situation where if White saves it, it always has a, like, what is the value of it, right? The value is whatever Black captures, not what we gain, right? Because this group will never have any point value in terms of territory. It's never going to become territory for White. And so it's also something where Black could just be like, hey, I'm not going to have to kill this now because I don't think White's going to save it now either. Sorry, just moving some windows around on my other screen. Um, And we see White instantly jumping in here and saying, no, you cannot have all of this. Understandably so. Oh, wow. That is a cool looking cut. So we can see that if White tries to connect up through here, which looks like is actually happens, and if... Okay. I was going to say maybe Black can cut through here, but if we try this, we can see that Black is actually just sealed in. Almost sealed. Nah, maybe not sealed in, actually. Interesting. Hmm. I don't know. I kind of want to cut right away. But I guess what Black is saying is that they can play here and kind of go for this top of the board as well, and it would be perfectly fine. And they don't really have to worry about this again. They got a lot of strength from the way uh, that they played earlier. They made sure that they didn't have any weak groups, and I think that's the cool part here. When you look at this board from this position here, right? Think about it like this as well. What's really cool and something that you really want to like a skill you really want to pick up is thinking about your groups, right? In a way where black doesn't have any weak groups on this board, but white has some groups here that are really attackable. And so black can feel really comfortable in this position because they don't have anything that can be attacked. And so all they have to do is attack because they don't have anything that can be attacked, right? It's very easy to attack when you don't have any groups that are weak, right? And so black says, I'm just going to be able to go ham here. So if white tries to just connect this up, we can see that this top side's becoming really, really big. Like this area of the board is just getting giant. Let's go ahead and go forward. And it kind of looks like that's actually what ends up happening. But white decided to play here first because they wanted the extra Aji for when they cut here. So we can kind of see that if we try to play this without, it could be a little different. Black might even choose to play here. Um, but I guess it's not really that different. White could end up going this way. But I would imagine it's because of Aji use. And again, we kind of see a similar technique over here that we saw down here. So let's go ahead and speed up a little bit. Because right now, white is just trying to get a reduction in. They're just trying to reduce the top side because it's really big. Um. Oh, okay. So I wonder if something that, because I'd imagine this is actually pretty scary to allow white to have this. Uh, but I think something that black is aiming for is this wedge move here. So if black plays this wedge and the whole center dies, then it is very much worth it. And the cool part is that we don't actually have to care about these 3 stones. And we can just ignore that if we're afraid of any kind of like shenanigans up here. And if white dies in the whole center here, the game would just be over. The game would be very, very, very much so over. So that's why white comes back and fixes here. And then black goes for the corner. And we know our basic life and death, as black, of course, knows their J groups. However, there is a bit of risk here because white does have this move here, and they do have a lot of liberties on this group. They've got 4 liberties, right? And we have to ask ourselves how many liberties we have here. So one thing that we have to think about when we're playing this out is that if we, so for example, if white was to take all our liberties here, can we still win the liberty race on this side? And is it worth it? But it looks like, okay. So even if white cuts here, white can't actually connect this. So that makes it really difficult. However, it looks like it will still be a problem because we would have to end up playing this ko. And if we play here, we can see that what black ends up being behind in the liberty race. So it would just be a ko. And as mentioned before, these 3 stones weren't really that big to begin with. So we can just sacrifice these and play anywhere else on the board that's really big. But let's go ahead and go forward. Kind of getting into the end game state here of this match. Oh, wow, okay. So white does end up cutting off the bottom, but black ends up being able to live here. But obviously we have our strong dog nose shape over here, so we don't actually have to worry about that. But yeah, now we are in the end game, and this is where it's gonna get kind of unfortunate for Wei Bin because it looks like he ends up losing on time here. I'm going to assume that this move wasn't actually played. and that it probably lost on time here. But if the game actually gets continued from this point, um, White is actually behind by about 2 points. Now, White doesn't actually have to connect here because there's an I here. Um, there's an I here, I mean, but they're still behind, basically. White doesn't really actually have enough ways to catch up. Um, but yeah, it was a very interesting game. It was very, very unfortunate. However, it has created the possibility of a very interesting scenario. But then again, I guess it also could have been really interesting the other way as well, because Doyup could have beaten Leo, and then Leo could have beaten Wei Bin, and we still would have ended up with a very interesting three-way. But yeah, that was the first game. Uh, Paige, you are so strong. What is your secret? Um, that's a really good question. I don't know what my secret is. I if you find out though, please let me know because I also need to know. Um, but yeah, we'll go ahead and call this game here, and we'll move on to the next one. However, I was told that before I go to the next one, we have to do like a 30-second break. So we're gonna do a 30-second break. Chris, can you hear me? Oh, I don't know if Chris can hear me. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna move on to the next game for break. The Mueller game. Oh, is that a live game? Okay, I was so confused. Okay, let's okay. Okay, we can do that one first, when we get back to it. We'll go over Leo versus Pei Chen. I'm sorry, I can't say this person's name. Okay, I'm unmuted. Hello, everybody. Again, this round. I'll just say everything I said. It's okay. It's okay. This round we have Leo Tan versus I mean, they all missed me saying this other guy's name possibly correctly. There's no way I get to do it again. Paige Hsiung? No, that was way worse than the first time. Oh well. Leo Tian, I actually think is the favorite for the tournament, and unfortunately, I don't know too much about the other player. But they are both 7 Dawn plus, and yeah, so we'll see how this game goes. So one thing that I actually want to mention about Leo's style, because I actually think Leo has one of the coolest and most unique styles in Go ever. And I actually think he has one of the most professional looking styles as well. Uh, One thing with professional players that you'll notice is that they play almost point for point. Basically, they make really smart trades. They don't really take stupid fights and that kind of stuff. And Leo plays just like that. My general thought of the way that Leo plays is that he keeps track of the score the entire time that he plays the game. Um, and so when you try to fight him or pick a fight or think that you are finally like forcing him into a battle, he's very good at just going, okay, I could fight you and maybe, just maybe take like a point 0.5 or a 5 point victory. But no, he will sidestep you and say, no, I never have to fight you. I never ever have to fight you ever. And it is very difficult to get this kid to take any battle, and he always wins out in the trades as well. So he is a mathematician, very smart with the trades. So we have a very interesting opening to start here. Uh, I think this is actually a really cool move. Because one thing that a lot of people might think is, especially with some of our DK viewers and our SDK viewers, um, one thing that AI has shown us is these very thin bases like this are actually really like can be really good. So, for example, White can also play this kind of move, and this can actually be very comfortable for White. Now, this isn't a good move for White, particularly because White is very flexible. White is very flexible with this group, so White doesn't have to play a move like this. But the idea is that you don't have to, for example, something that I really see very often with some of my students is they try to force that two space base by making an attachment. This is not a really like good way to make a base, because you are making black very strong in this area. And so it is okay to take a two space base here, or a one space base here. Or you can play away and say this group is very flexible, basically. Which basically means that even if black takes away its base, it's okay because it has so many ways to get out. And you can actually see kind of Leo's style playing here as well. He says that this is super flexible to the point that he can still ignore this. So instead of trying to do this or extend it out here and increase the value of this group, he's just saying, I'm very flexible here. I know that you're never really going to be able to launch a strong attack on this group. And so I'm just going to remain flexible. I'm just going to keep being very flexible. However, black plays one of my favorite moves in Go, which is this. A lot of people are very into pincer, um, the pincer these days. I'm not a big fan of the pincer. I really like just this slide here. This is going out. It's not as popular these days, but I really like this. It's simple because when you play this, you are basically inciting a fight, right? Like you are going to get a fight here, because obviously you're pincering something, right? But when you play here, it's very nice. It's basically a small loss for something that's not a big deal, and it keeps the game very simple. However, it does open Sorry, my voice box. Uh, but it is very simple, and this is kind of the downside, though, of playing this, is that you do allow your opponent to play this attachment here, which it allows white to be very comfortable. Um, and again, white isn't, making this out to be a big deal. White says, "Hey, I'm okay with if you take this stone, because it's just going to make me stronger if you do that." And so black says, I want to reinforce this group here and kind of launch an attack now on this. Again, white is saying, I don't have to, connect up here. White would just happily play this. And so black has to extend here. But he does end up coming back and saving the stone, especially because this Hane is really big. So if we were to play away as black, we can see that this Hane is really big. And if black, Atari's here and here, we can see that white actually gets the split on these three stones. So it makes it very easy for for white to live. And so black says, I don't want that to be that easy for you. I want you to have to run here. And so he drops down. And this is again where it's really important for you to know exactly what your opponent is thinking and to be able to evaluate the board and go, I understand what my opponent wants. If your opponent is dropping here, one, it's because the territory is really big, but also you're really unsettled here as white. You are flexible, but you don't have any eyes. So it is very easy for black to launch an attack. And so you want to be able to understand when your opponent is telegraphing something to you. They are making it obvious that they want something. And so it is obvious that black is going to attack this. And so it makes a lot of sense that white will now want to reinforce this to make sure that they're not going to get pressured or attacked in a really big way. And we're just going to see some normal shape moves, a cap, kind of stop the connection up of these two groups because these are two separate groups here. And black says, I don't want you to connect up here. So again, black is telegraphing. Black is saying, hey, with this move, I am keeping you split. And that is something you want to keep in mind because that means it is possible that black will be launching an attack on this group up here later on. But right now, this is less flexible than this. So white is going to jump out here with this. Black doesn't attack right away. So something we might see later is something like this, which allows us to start building in this direction, but also starts the attack on this group. Oh wow, white just chooses to be like, hey, I'm just gonna go for my corner. But again, playing to where Leo is very strong, he says, again, I'm very flexible here. I don't have to play into your attack. I can just continue to build what I have. He just says I can continue to build my corner cleanly. You can't attack me. And we'll see it quite with any of Leo's games, you'll see it quite a few times where he just ignores his opponent to their face. And it can be very frustrating. And so you'll see it here. White says, "Hey, I can play away." Black says, "You got to respond to me." But White says again, "Nope. I'm just gonna play away. What kind of attack can you launch on me?" And eventually that does trigger the okay. I'm just gonna start ignoring you, and I'm gonna start. I'm not gonna attack this anymore because clearly it's not as attackable, right? Though White does finally come over here. But you can see it again, white choosing to jump here rather than defending here. And this actually plays into, and I'm going to quickly do this just to kind of show you guys. You'll notice that in more modern Joseki, black no longer defends here because this used to be like a top 2 Joseki, right? You would see this almost every single game um, 10 years ago, right? And so we can kind of apply that here as well. So anytime you get slid under like this, by a Blackstone, you don't actually have to play this move. Because it's very easy to play here at c3, and then for black to just play away. And so sometimes when you want to keep tempo, it is good to think, okay, in the Joseki, we know that this can just end up being Gote and very slow. So maybe at this point in the game, it's really not that big for white to come back and block here. And it's also really not that big for black to come here. And so it's kind of like an even result regardless of who gets it. As long as you know that there are bigger, more important moves on the board. As you can see, both black and white are kind of ignoring this at this point, and white making themselves comfortable, making sure that they're, limiting the amount of groups that can be attacked. Ooh, okay. So one way that we actually usually see uh, that black can usually live here is through this way, and then white can sacrifice this. But there's also sometimes where black could be attacked in a more heavy way, um, or even like this. But however, uh, I don't know the variation entirely, but it is something like this. And black gets a lot of forcing moves on the outside. I don't know the full variation. I don't remember it. I studied it for a while, but basically black is gonna give up a lot here to kind of get the outside. However, we will notice that it's really not worth it because if black was to get all the forcing moves here, they would only get the territory between here, and it's really not worth it. So black says, I'd rather live inside. I want to go back and live inside instead. And so this is a very interesting move. I've actually not seen this move. Usually it's here. But maybe black says that they do think that this isn't big enough. Like maybe this isn't big enough because it does look really tiny, right? So black is gonna look to live in a bigger way. And so black lives here. So I wonder what a better way to attack this would have been. But again, white played into their style. They're saying, I don't actually have to kill this. Because I would have been really tempted to just say, no, you are going for that trade. You are 100% going for that trade that you said you're gonna live in a really tiny way in this corner, which is really similar to kind of the other variation we looked at, right? And so white decides, I'm gonna let you live in a slightly bigger way, and I think I'm still winning. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at score estimator. White has a 7-point lead. So they obviously, again, are keeping track of the score, and they know exactly how much pressure they need to put on. They don't have to murder black. They're just like, hey, I'm just winning. I'm just winning outright. And we can see they defend again. White says, hey, I'm just gonna go ahead and defend, my territory. I've already defended one of my weak groups here. It can't be attacked. This is the only group that can be attacked. But this is very flexible group. Ignores. Black is really looking to force white around. They're looking to get out moves like this, right? But also, one thing that black might be worried about is what happens if white starts to, seal black out of this, right? This would become pretty big. But every time that black tries to get a footstep in, white is able to just go, okay, well, if you're going to come in over here, I'm going to go ahead and build over here instead, and I'm just going to get as many points as you're taking. I'm going to get more points from building than you're going to take anyway. Board Troll says, was black too focused on attack instead of grabbing points? Um, I don't want to say that black was too focused on attacking because the thing is, the thing that makes Leo so strong is that he can evaluate these point positions very, very well that a lot of players can't. Um, so to Black, he may have seen it as if I play here, my opponent has to respond to me. And a lot of players will feel like they have to respond. Um, being an aggressive player myself, it is very frustrating when when I play a move that I think is forcing or sente, and my opponent suddenly plays away, and I can't punish them for it. So I won't say that that Black was too focused on attacking. They probably played moves that they felt were forcing, and White just was able to keep track of the account so well that they realized I don't have to respond to these moves. I don't have to respond to this attack. Uh, so it is very possible that he may have been over focused on attacking, but it could also be due to, hey, I thought my opponent had to respond here, right? um, but also, we also have to realize also that Black did end up getting, Black ended up getting 1 corner, 2 corner, 3 corner, 4 corner. Black did end up getting all 4 corners, and they're behind by quite a bit. 7 points at this point. And so that could also be really frustrating when you're taking the corners and you feel like you're actually building up that territory, but the other player is still, you know, gaining in points. They're not really losing in points, and that can be really hard and rough to deal with. Um, however, with that being said, there is a weakness too when you are doing this. Go isn't all about backing down from every single attack that your opponent does. You know, that eventually is going to catch up to you. You do have to be able to fight sometimes. And if you always avoid fights, you are not always going to be able to fight. Basically, if you are avoiding fights, it is natural that your weakness might be your ability to fight. And so if you are avoiding every fight, you might end up into fights that you have to play and you're not going to know how to pilot them. And so I think that can be a weakness of Leo's is that I know in our games in the past, sometimes we would get into fights where I could force him into my pace, and he would struggle in those fights. Uh, Granted, it was very frustrating to kind of try to force him into those positions. But yeah, let's go ahead and go forward. And so we can actually see now we're getting to a thing where this Black group can be attacked here. And so this is where I would want to launch an attack on Black. But again, this is also probably where Leo's weakness comes in is that he's not the type to launch those kinds of attacks, right? And so this is something where we might want to take advantage of Black here, but maybe White doesn't end up doing that when they should. um, because you can kind of see here that Black is instantly going for like life here, right? They're just like, I'm gonna make life here. I feel like I'm under threat of an attack, but White actually has no interest in actually killing that, and so you can get away with a lot of stuff in in these kinds of games where you normally wouldn't. And we can see White is just continuing to build. Again, continuing to build. But this one obviously, is pretty big, right? Uh, we can't really escape here. So White is going to go ahead and make sure that they're alive here. But yeah, so simple end game here. We definitely got end game pretty early, so I'm going to go ahead and go forward through some of this. Because I know the score. Oh, wow. Okay, hold up. I'm going to guess that this was played out of order. I'm going to guess that this was played out of order. So just so everyone's aware, there are some these are all transcribed by somebody watching the game, and so there's probably some errors because we should definitely be connecting this Atari here. Um, I refuse to believe that white did not connect that, and I refuse to believe that black did not take this stone. So my guess as to the actual variation is probably something like this. Um, Same for these. This is also probably something like this. Um, but yeah. So some of these moves are a little strange. But that's okay. That's okay. I think for the most part, we're pretty much in endgame anyway. Now, I do once again, I do know the end game score. So we saw that white did have um, a pretty big lead. It was 8 points, but by the end of the game, it actually goes down to about 4 points. Uh, so white ended up losing by, or not losing. White ended up winning, but they did lose quite a bit of points in that mid-game skirmish that they chose not to fight. And that's not actually that bad. Only 4 points to say I simply won by a little bit. And it's actually, I actually think it's very Lee Chang Ho style when you think about it. Like anybody that's seen the match recently, where he's like, I could do this, but I really believe I could just squeeze out 0.5 here. It's very interesting. But yeah, uh, we'll go ahead and move on to the third game. Chris, you can go ahead and yeah, break everybody, break. I'll be back in 30 seconds. Oh, okay. All right, I'm back, everybody. We made sure the mic was turned on this time. All right, in this round, so we're still on round three, everybody. Just so you're all aware, we are still on round three. Round four is currently still going. We'll be moving over to that shortly. We're looking at the last round three game between Brady and Ivan. I want to say that Brady is actually the first player that I learned about when I came back to Go. Because I came back to Go when Brady and Kevin Yang were playing in the Transatlantic Pro League thing, and they were like the amateurs in the group, and they actually ended up both doing really well. Uh, and so I was very hyped because I love when our players over in between U.S. and Canada are crushing the European competition. And so I loved watching Brady and Kevin play uh, in that event. And I unfortunately don't know Ivan too well. I know that I believe he won the Canadian Open last year or the year before. I can't remember. But I know that he is a very strong player. But yeah, let's go ahead and see how their game goes. Okay, pretty basic opening. U over NA, I see. Oh wow, that is very interesting move by Brady. Um, so I don't have all the answers. I'm not quite sure why Black chose to play this move. But technically, I actually think both of their moves are very interesting. So uh, we don't actually often see White add another move here. We'll usually see this kind of ending in where Black ends up getting this move instead. And so White chooses to respond here. And so maybe Black decides that they don't want the bottom to be built too big. But I'm not sure. It is very strange because the thing is, if we were to play away, there's really no way that White would just continue to build this bottom, right? It's a side for one. We still have an approachable corner up here, so basically Black would be more efficient by playing these moves, right? And so it would be very slow for White to go back and add a move down here right now. And so honestly, as Black, I would choose to approach this corner, or I would choose to reinforce my corner because I would feel like I'm being more efficient, right? And I know that there's no way that White is ever going to play this move. So it is very out of order for Black to come down here now. But maybe they didn't want to deal with the possibility that White will build the bottom in a large way. But Black chooses to go with a nice simple group, and White plays a nice simple bottom as well. They say, hey, that's okay. Oh wow, okay, so these are actually both having some interesting issues.
A straightforward play of
Marty
jumping
says,
play. This looks
sorry,
like
I
a
can't say your name,
motion.
but Marty says that we're creating an echo. Are we
I
aware
did
of
the
that?
hard part. You just have to look at the game.
Oh, did you hear me, Chris?
YouTube.
So one of the viewers said we are creating an echo. Is that? They said there's an echo. Oh, I wonder if they hear, because I'm screen sharing. So I wonder if they hear the echo through my video ninja. Because yeah, I don't know if that's actually fixable. No, they're not able to hear me. Yeah, no, they wouldn't be able to hear me. So then never mind. So then it's not coming. So then it wouldn't be coming through my video. That's okay. Board Troll says the echo gives an interesting vibe. Yeah. Yeah, I doubt that would fix the echo. That's okay. Wait. Board Troll says now there's no echo. Okay, I guess it's fixed. Okay. Anyway, so we've got quite an interesting position here. So we're definitely playing this game very out of order because, as you all know, it's something that I preach a lot: corner, side, center. We don't got corner, side, center here. We got center, and then maybe corner, and then side. Black is definitely going for the center here. And so and I just want to show you guys something really cool. I'm going to be very quick here. One of the reasons we don't go for the center, and this is one of my favorite ways to show why we don't go for the center, or why we don't prioritize it over over the sides. I'm going to show you guys very quickly. Looks like a beautiful chunk of territory, right? And so a lot of people think that you're going to get the territory between here. However, if you're playing white and you invade here, you can't really keep black, you can't really keep white in. So you block, right? But you're going to get reduced again, and reduced again. And so you end up with this really tiny box, and you end up with this very small, tiny bit of territory that you expected to be a lot bigger. And so when we see that black is building the center here, it's very interesting because at the end of the day, black isn't actually going to be expecting to get a lot of points here. They have to be very smart about how they build this, because if they try to go all in on this, it's going to be really easy to just go, I'm just going to poke all of these small little areas here and reduce it to this really small, tiny box. And so you have to be really careful about how you build up the center. And that's why a lot of players will generally go for the sides and the corners before they start going for the center. But we kind of see that's a little different here with Brady. And so white puts pressure on black's corner here. And black says, hey, I want to make sure that I'm alive here, make sure that I can't be killed, and that I have at least a decent sized corner. And so black is choosing to go here, which I also think is really interesting. And I think one of the reasons is because if we do go up here or we play elsewhere, we know that an approach isn't exactly sensei. And so a lean like this from white could be really big, right? Because if we're looking to attack this black group here later, then it makes a lot of sense to lean here to be able to split the two groups and make sure there's no attack. So you can see here instantly black is saying, I know that this is a vital point, and so I want to stop that from happening. I want to stop white from playing this move. So you can kind of use the proverb here. What is my best move? Oh, my best move is my opponent's best move. And so we can imagine that both players probably wanted to play that. And of course, this also triggers white saying, okay, you played this. I've got to go back and live now. As for a lot of other players might try to come out here to continue to keep black split here. But the problem is that it's really unlikely that we're going to kill this like this. And so trying to jump out and run here, it's just not really it's really not the best. And so white says, I understand that I have a group here that can be attacked and it's weak. So, or it's not weak per se, but it can be attacked, right? And so I'm going to go back and make sure that I don't have something that falls out later and can get heavily attacked later. So really smart to come back here and make sure that they're alive.
Really
And
ready
now,
yet?
and now begin the approach, which is
I haven't even started the review, so.
Oh.
And we haven't got the right board up.
Out of this, Santiago's
I
going
would
to
say
move in.
standard move, but
Great.
You're good to go?
Okay.
All right.
interesting video. So white jumps out here.
Okay, I'll just go through the moves, and why don't you tell me?
I taught my sister the.
And then if white plays here. I haven't had time.
So I played this. Yeah.
Help in some of these diagrams. End of the game is still looking okay. Okay. I got an idea, and I'll review the game.
Stronger. It doesn't make us stronger as well. Well, black already feels like they already have a
Really ready yet?
this.
I haven't even started the review, so.
Oh.
And we haven't got the right board up.
To be turning themselves strong.
So yeah.
Is this the right board?
So up this, okay, this is where it gets good for black.
David did it today, which is nice.
Yeah. And at the point of the end of the game, it's still looking okay for black. Okay.
When your opponent
I
plays,
got an idea. I'll review the game and copy that.
I pretty much have a self that I have every time my opponent peeps. I never knee-jerk react because a lot of peeps can be scams.
Yeah.
All right, folks. So bonus stream. This guy behind us, Santiago. He's been lurking for like an hour, I think, right? He has been.
You want to kind of look to at other moves because if you just knee-jerk react every time, you're gonna miss out on a lot of moves. And so, like, look at it like this, right? Black got a lot of forcing moves, and this can feel really bad when you didn't have to do this the entire time. You could have other moves, right? And so something that black might have been like, okay, I know why it's going to respond this way. They said it's okay now. They said it's suddenly okay. It sounds like it's going back and forth between not okay and okay. But yeah, so when white plays here, so something that black was probably thinking about is if white plays here, then I can come back and go ahead and cut here. Redmond was on in the background for a few minutes. I don't have a Redmond stream going or a Redmond video. Yeah, I'm not sure what that is, unfortunately. But also, you can see here that if black continues to like try to fight this, so like say black tries to continue to fight this group here, this can be a problem up here. We don't exactly have space here. We are in like an okay position as black, but we want to be careful. We don't want to get cut off here. And so we can see instantly black's going to go ahead and jump out here. So that should be fixed now. Awesome, it should be fixed according to Todd. But yeah, so we can kind of see black bails a bit on this here. And I think that it's not too bad because we are at least getting kind of a surround on this stone, so we are becoming a little bit stronger. And we don't want to just Hana here, so you'll notice that white actually plays on top here and not just here, because white is trying to look to protect this cutting point. But if we play here, black gets this really strong move here. Instead, they get the drop down, right? But if we play here, black still has to come out. Black doesn't have any choice but to come out. But now they can't get the really strong descent here as well on top of it. So it's very, very smart move. Black kicks again. We're pretty much obviously going back here. And this is one of those situations where I wouldn't extend. Usually when you're kicked, you want to extend. But white chooses to jump here. And that's because this is more flexible. Very, basically more flexible to make life and not rely on this. So if black goes for this one stone, we could just be like, hey, that is, a casualty, right? Like, unfortunately, we've got to let that go. We're going to keep running out, right? And then this would be really similar to kind of what I talked about at the beginning, where wouldn't really expect black to play down here because we didn't really expect white to play down there. And so we wouldn't really expect black to cut this stone off. Black looking to cut through here. However, white is trying to refute this, and I don't like this. I think white is trying to refute this too hard. I think they are braining too hard. So now I will mention that I do think it is important to mention this, because here's the thing is, we could say that white should maybe come out. And I actually do think that this is correct. I actually do think white should come out in one way or another. Because I think this fight is still hard for black. I don't think it's that clear. But it's weird because white plays here, and then black gets cut off, and then white goes into this corner. And so it's almost like white is adding to this pile, giving black a little bit more strength on the outside here, and then bailing and going into the corner. It feels very hopeful, It feels very hopeful. And so white now is kind of relied on just stealing a little bit from the corner, but now this is basically just dead for white up here. This has almost no hope of living. I don't see how they would live here. Like the best thing they could do is here, and black would definitely block here. White has no way of making up the liberties and sealing black in at the same time. And so white is kind of reliant on reducing this. But even then, black doesn't actually have to give up the corner. And so I feel like it would just be better to come out now and try to come out here. But it also feels rough. It's very hard. It's very hard for white because white has the weak group here, So maybe I wouldn't play this as white, and I would continue. Because again, maybe black will play this because it concerns a connection, but it's still like acceptable, right? So I'm very confused about the variations here, but it is what it is. But yeah. Okay, so black chooses to defend the left here. Can't really cut through here still, but there's still a lot of territory to be had here. This is some Aji, some cutting Aji. And now we're kind of getting a little bit into the end game here. Ooh, okay, so black is setting up for the cut here. So if white blocks here, we can see that white doesn't actually have enough liberties to be able to play through here. So they have to connect. And now we can go ahead and connect up here. But black is not able to connect or cut off this white group here, right? There's no way to be able to stop this from connecting under. Oh, wow. White goes really deep on the invasion. And I think this is actually because white is feeling the pressure. I think black is ahead here. I'm going to guess black is ahead. Yeah, so black is ahead by 4.5. And so white is saying that if I try to make just a simple invasion, it may not be enough. However, I actually think that this is where the weak point of the middle comes in, is that it's very easy to just poke and prod. You don't actually need to jump really deep here. Obviously, maybe white feels they have to, and maybe white feels like they can because it's such an open center, right? Like, there's not really a good move here that actually kind of kills the white stone. But I do think that you can feel a little bit lighter with some of these moves if you want to. Like, I think you would end up reducing just about the same amount. And then maybe not allow black to play some forcing moves against some stones out here. But I think it's fine either way. I don't think either one is right or wrong. Ooh, okay. So white Hane's here. So generally, I think that white would just be looking for the end game here. And so black says, I don't want to give that to you. And you still have to live anyway. So it does reduce the end game a little bit. Oh, wow. Okay. White is committing though, and black is also committing. So this is getting crazy. So life and death says white is dead. Wait. Life and death says white is alive. Oh, okay. So is it kind of like this? Because this would be Seki. So white ends up living in a really big way here. However, now it is. So I wonder if black launches an attack on this group then, because white living up here is actually a really big deal because we're not even connected yet out here, right? And so it's very possible that this could still be disconnected. But then there's this, and it's like, well, maybe this white group here could be disconnected. So this is actually a little confusing, slightly above my level. So we'll just have to kind of learn together how black plans to juggle these, right? So black is kind of looking to utilize the kind of jump out here, right? The lack of liberties on this. However, what happens if white just plays something like this? I guess it's really difficult to be able to. Maybe white just has enough liberties here, because white would have to come over here, right? I'm not sure. It's very complicated. So white just connects up here in the end, and allows black to connect up out as well. That's fair, because black's going to connect up with this, and then white's going to try to connect up this between these. I think that's fair. I'd have a hard time calculating that, but I think that's fair. So black says that if white connects here and can play this Atari, and this would lead to this group being disconnected. And if white connects it, then this also leads to this group being disconnected. And it's even worse because white has to connect here, and black would be able to play this Atari here, and it would end up being a snapback. So white has to take these stones, but black has this move. So now we know it's actually a ko, right? So black plays here, white blocks, because if black plays here now without that, we can actually just connect them. Oh, well, I guess we can't actually. I guess this would also be a ko. I was going to say we could play this, but I feel like this is actually really big. I'm not sure. Both players are playing a really complicated trading game. So they end up going for the ko anyway. I at least know that. All right, let's go ahead and go forward. So white is, again, trying to live inside here. So one really interesting thing here is that for the players that do know the score, so black actually ends up winning, I think, by like 1.5 or something like that. You'll notice that white dies a lot here. Like this looks like a pretty big death. And I think this is also something that's really important to talk about. Like this looks like a pretty big, group death. Black must be ahead by a lot now. So why is it only a 1-point victory? Well, let's go ahead and check the score estimator. So it is a black plus 9.3. So maybe something else happens. But it is worth noting that white doesn't actually lose a lot more here than they had already had, right? Like black was bound to get the center. They spent a lot of moves to make this center, so naturally they're going to get a big center. However, I guess white does something to kind of make up this game, right? Because we see that it was a 9.3 lead here, and it ends up going down to about a 1-point lead. So I wonder how white ends up kind of bringing the game closer. That or I got the end game score wrong. Increasing liberties. Okay, big end game. Well, whatever it is, it's got to be coming up soon. Or again, I got the end game score wrong. Because there's no big trades happening. I guess it might have just been the end game. I guess white just started playing really well in the end game. But yeah, for the most part, this is just endgame. All right. Let's see. Square estimator say 4.9. Okay, so it wasn't 1.5, it was 4.9. But white did make up about 5 points in the endgame there. And then top did end up in Seki. But yeah, that was a really interesting game. Brady went for the center. I think it was a really interesting choice, and it worked out for them. But I also think they might be like quite a little bit stronger than Ivan, to be honest. So they've probably got to use the advantage there. But yeah. All right, I think we're done with round 3. Though Chris isn't here. Chris, come back wherever you are. But yeah. So while we're waiting for Chris to come back, we'll go ahead and scroll down backward. We'll take a look at some stuff while we're waiting. Let's see. Does anybody have any specific questions about any moves while we're waiting? Yeah, you're welcome. Oh, never mind. Chris is back. Hi, welcome back. We're ready for round 4, but we are going to a break. We're going to break. So we're going to go to a break, and then we'll come back with a game that ended very quickly in round 4. It was a very, very quick game, and so I'm very curious because I haven't seen it yet. I've seen a part of it, but we'll look at that when we come back. Okay, I'm ready. If we weren't already. Can we Yay! Hello, everybody. I'm back. Oh, wait, we got a raid. I've got a raid of 5 from Daniel. Hey, Daniel. Woo! Thank you for the raid. Board Troll says, "Is that the guy who always accompanies Redmond, like in the AlphaGo games?" No, actually, that's Chris. That's who we're talking. That's who I'm talking to. He's the one that accompanies Redmond in the AlphaGo series, which was actually a really interesting series. Oh my. Okay, not me. You don't want me to say, okay. Do I know? Wait, he is a former? Isn't there only like 3 AJ presidents? Okay, then I do know him then. I just don't know which one he is. Well, there you go, guys. Extra points if you can figure out who that is. But yeah, so we have Martin Mueller versus Hsiung for this game, which is a very interesting game. I did get a quick look at it, and it's a very fast game. It's a very fast game. So this game is actually over already. And just so everyone's aware, we are round 4 now. We just finished going over round 3 games. We're now looking at round 4 games. Round 4 is still going, for the exception of this game. This game ended. It was a very quick game. And Yongfei made very quick work. So let's go ahead and see how they did that. So pretty, I was gonna say standard, but again, with the Canadian Open, we are getting some very, very unique openings and some very unique games. It's very interesting. So we can see Black does a big jump. So a lot of people are really used to probably this, and I think a lot of people get tired of seeing this. Not just viewers, but also the players themselves. I know that my roommate absolutely loves doing this and absolutely loves doing this crosscut. And so we all kind of find our own way of dealing with that. And I think that Martin's way of dealing with that is to play here. Also, something that's also really interesting is that when you play somebody that you think is stronger than you don't often like going into this, because if you don't know it that well, or you're just not very a deep reader or something like that, losing in this Joseki, like dying in this Joseki or running into a problem with this Joseki, can put you really far behind. And so everyone kind of comes up with their own way of dealing with that. One that I'm kind of trying to pick up is this one, because I really don't like doing this very often. And so I'm trying to learn this one. I also like the idea of playing away. I also really like the idea of playing away, because I'd rather play from this shape. And so I feel like Black also probably feels the same, because they're more comfortable playing from this shape, probably. I'm not saying that's how they actually feel, but that would be my imagination. I play F16, so you play F16. Yeah, F16 is very interesting. This is the one that I am trying to learn a little bit. I also really like playing away. So white is looking for kind of this follow-up shape here, but black also has the choice to play here also. And this would kind of lead into a bit of a complicated fight. So this could lead to an interesting position that could have been played. But both players are going into pretty standard normal openings, for the exception of maybe this move. I'm not saying it's not normal, but probably not what we're all used to seeing. White choosing to kind of just go for basic territory. They could do this, but you're going to end up getting more points from the corner. You also ask questions like, does black really want to play this kind of move? And kind of similar to this position here, where black doesn't respond to this, we also should not be responding with this or this, really. We want to be efficient. We want to be really efficient. So we're going to look for other moves like this one because we don't really care if white plays this move. White already got the biggest benefit of the corner, which is this move here at P2. So let's say, white didn't play that, white played away. Something that we might think about as black is to play here, or we might kick it, because this is where the benefit comes of the corner. But the moment that white jumps in at P2, the corner doesn't have all of that immediate benefit anymore. And so we don't actually have to play here. We don't have to play here. Plus, this also feels like really strange shape. This also feels like really strange shape. And so we don't really want to play them unless we feel like these are the biggest points on the board or the most efficient points on the board. And so we jump up at the top. How old are the players? I have no idea. I do not think either of these two are children, though. So I'm unsure. That might be a better question for viewers that might know the players. But I am unsure. Oh, let me click this. So here, when white approaches here, we usually see kind of this jump out or this here, but black decides that they're going to go into try to take the corner away. So one thing that we might see is something like this. Oh, wow. Okay, so black is choosing to allow the cut, which I guess is understandable, because if white cuts here, black connects, and if white plays something like this is a lot of points for black. Though we wouldn't play here at 2, we would actually play here at S16. And the reason for that is because if we go here and white wedges, or even just plays the cut here, let's do the wedge though. Then what black can or white can actually capture these 4 stones, and we wouldn't want to do that. And so we connect up like this, which prevents the cut. So if white tries to hane here, black can hane back, and would be I versus no I, right? I versus no I. And if we connect here, we can see there's no way to cut this group off. And so this is a really good Tsuchi for connecting them. Also, really common Tetsuji that you can find on like Sumego Dragon or 101 Wichi or anything like that. And that is actually how the game went. That is exactly how the game went. And so we can see white invading the right side. So I think this is where a lot of players struggle in their games. It kind of looks like that both players are like, hey, the game's kind of getting solved. Not solved, but like right there, the boards, like this side of the board is pretty much complete. This side of the board is pretty much complete. This side of the board is pretty much complete. Almost, like it's pretty much almost decided, right? Who's gonna get what area of the board, what, right? And so it's really good to look towards. Well, obviously, the first question you should ask yourself is like, what is the most urgent move on the board? And I would say there's nothing urgent on this board. I don't think there's any urgent moves on this board. So the next thing would be, what is the biggest move? Where is the most open part of the board? So some moves we might look for are something like this over here. So we might want to look for like this instead, actually, because I would probably want to look for a follow-up like this one. Or I would want to play over here. I think this area is pretty open, so I think it's not too difficult for white to be able to live in here. And black also realizes that, because if we wanted to kill this white stone, we would probably look for something like this, but I think it's very easy for white to be able to live here. So black says, okay, I will cut my losses. I will look to achieve territory here. and I will go ahead and let you live in here. Like, that's perfectly fine. However, I do think that this is already actually a bit of a difficult game for black, because white is clearly ahead in territory, and black is defending in like really slow ways, right? Like, again, earlier we mentioned that this was very inefficient, right? Like, this felt very inefficient to have to play this move. But now here's the problem, is that if black is getting cut off, so if this group is getting separated from this suddenly means that we now have to come back and play a move like this or a move like this, and we have to play these these moves that feel very inefficient when we didn't want to have to play them in the first place. We would rather our opponent, play here, and we go here, and we give up the corner, and then we get, the outside, right? That was what we wanted. And so we could say that in a way, I wonder if it would have been worth adding a move over here a lot sooner. It's kind of hard to say though, because if we also if we add a move here now, for example, it feels very inefficient. So I'd almost be tempted to have done this instead, because now I feel like this area isn't as important, and I would be a little bit more prone to maybe play on top. But when I feel like I've got all of these, all of this Aji here in the corner, I probably would want to block this way also. But yeah, and you can see white is just continuing to kind of build their lead up a little bit. But we get an actual, like a really interesting move, that some people thought or some of the others thought was a miss transcription move, which is this move here. B15 is very interesting, and it looks like a transcription issue or a misclick. I don't think it is. I think it is actually an actual move. So if white plays away, I think that black can play this move here. I think this move is really good, because if white drops down here, obviously the corner is alive, right? And so if white plays here, then black also can live in the corner in co, right? And so this can be very dangerous for white to allow. And so I think that is why white is fixing here. Now, some people might be asking, why doesn't white fix like this instead? Or, this instead, right? So white is saying that if I play here, I think it is still my sensei. And if black plays away, I have a lot of Aji here, or I have a very large monkey jump. And it's very awkward if black plays the pillar here, right? And if we play here and black drops, we can see that now black has some endgame here with the clamp, the turn, and so there's some extra endgame there. And then also if white kicks here, then black gets to extend here. So you could say that this move here and this move here are kind of like attaching to your opponent, and they're making them stronger. So white chooses to play here to prevent this beautiful B17 move, but also says, I'm not going to make you stronger here at the same time. And so it kind of works in two ways. Now, of course, this does allow black to jump out, but there's still a lot of Aji here with the monkey jump, right? So it would be big reduction at the end in the end game. But when you're looking at this board, it's a little bit painful for black, because where is black's points, right? Black has this for points. This is basically the abundance of black points, right? And it's basically third or fourth line territory. And then we've got like first line territory here, a bit of second line or third line. I know people call it third line territory. I see it has two spaces, so I call it second line, okay? But yeah, so black is pretty low on territory. As to where when you look at white, this is pretty much equal to this over here. And then this is actually going to be end up being bigger than what black has over here. So I would say that white has a pretty big lead already. And what does black have left to even attack? The game has pretty much been a really solid back and forth of, I'll take this territory, you take that territory. And so I think black needed to do something a lot earlier on. Um, but yeah, it's very hard to come back in this game. Black attempts to live on top, but there's just no way. No way. The only thing he can do left is try to build this area of the board and to justify some points here. But obviously, the problem is that it's the center, so we're obviously going to get lots of pokes and prods on it. And so it's not really going to come out to be very many points. It's third line when you're selling and second line when you're buying. Exactly, One-Eyed Dragon. Yes. But yeah, it was a very, very quick game, very fast game, and this is kind of where it ended, with Young Fei winning by resignation. Um, but yeah, welcome back, Chris. We are ready for a break to set up for next game. Yeah, sure, I can say hi. I can actually kind of see him back there. Got a break. Okay. Hello. Yay, I'm unmuted and I'm back. Hello, everybody. Now we got what I think is either going to be the most exciting game in the tournament or the second most exciting game in the tournament. Because I am very excited to see Leo versus Wei Bin. But for now, we have Leo versus Do Yum. And the really cool part about this is that we get that exact kind of clash that I talked about, where I said that Leo has a very calm style, has a very rebound-like style where when you're aggressive, he rebounds you with hugs, basically. He hugs you to death, and pushes you away, right? As to where Yup wants to get all up in your face and force you into fights that you can't handle. And so they're very polar opposites. And so in a way, Leo kind of counters Yup as a player, but at the same time, as somebody that again has played Leo quite a bit, I've found that that sometimes Leo doesn't take fights that he should take. And so very curious if he will do that here, if he will end up defending, his groups well enough that, that his opponent can't over attack, right? Especially in Do-Yup style. All right, we've got a very large jump. Oh, this is another one that I actually want to get into. So one really good trick to players that don't like the crosscut. So anytime you don't want to play this, something that players do is they will approach. But if you play here as black, you'll often get this move for white. But you can actually force the crosscut here, or the pinwheel Joseki if you wanted by doing this. However, there are also different ways that white could play. So white could do something like this and kind of go into this Joseki. This is a viable Joseki option to kind of force away the crosscut. And then there's also this move. I'm not super familiar with this one myself, but it seems pretty basic. So let's go ahead and go forward. So here we can see that white plays here. A lot of people might be a little bit confused about this move because it looks kind of like we're wasting a stone, Kind of looks like we're just giving up a stone, but we're actually getting extra forcing moves. So we can see that if white was to just drop down here, for example, it's very easy for black to just immediately take that cut. Immediately cut. But if black plays here, black says, "Oh, but I'm in a Tori. I've got to respond. I could take the stone, but then I'm in a Tori here. And if I Tanuki, obviously, white's just going to take this. And so we have to connect, right? But then white gets to come back and fix all the issues that they had there. And so instead, black chooses to drop down. And so we sacrifice a one stone to be able to get some extra moves. And now we go back and defend here rather than just defending here immediately. Because we can also see that maybe black plays here. And then we have to do it like this. And that's just really uncomfortable, especially when you get into this idea that, hey, there's a potential B2 bomber here, right? And so it's a really good way to avoid some bad shape. But white is very light, very strong here, and so they play away. And you can see Leo backs off here as well. We definitely don't want to allow white to pincer this because white isn't alive with this group. They're comfortable, but they're not alive. And so we don't want to give them that opportunity to be able to just outright live. And so white approaches and goes into the corner. Pretty simple life. You definitely don't want to be afraid here or too greedy. This is another problem that I often really see is that whenever your opponent, goes here and then jumps into the corner, a lot of players will try to split these two groups. You don't want to do this. You want to treat this often as one group. There is cases where you might want to try to, like for example, if white plays here, maybe you want to split, right? Maybe you want this split, and then maybe white jumps over here, right? But otherwise you don't want to try to put everything into this by trying to fight it off and go for like some crazy split, especially in the opening. You want the opening to be calm and strong because you need to be capable of fighting with these groups in the mid game. In fact, there's a huge misconception that Dawn players read more moves than you do. That's not actually true. It's very possible that Dawn players read the same amount of moves. The difference, one of the big differences, is that we actually don't go into the middle game with really loose groups. And so a huge part of your middle game fighting, and something that a lot of players misunderstand, is that you shouldn't fight out of the opening. And I know this really well because I'm a fighter, right? You shouldn't outright start with the boxing, right? You want to actually have strong groups that you can fight with, not crazy groups that you want to fight with. And so you should strengthen your groups and be strong. Solid connections here, right? And so black is going to let white live and say, hey, that's okay. I'm going to take the corner and I get a really nice wall towards my side. Fia says, Leo looked very pumped leaving the Go Bond just now. I'll be honest, I looked at the score, so I cheated a little bit. I saw the score. I know why he feels pumped. I would feel pumped. But, yeah, so black simply goes into the corner and this says good enough. And then white says, I don't want a weak group. So a lot of players might play away here, but this allows white to be attacked here. So white says, I will play here. It might seem slow, and it does allow black to have Sente, but I don't want to have a group that can just be attacked all the time. And so I'm going to add a move here, and I will let black go ahead and take, the initiative to go, wherever they want. Because black doesn't have to play here. Black can do this. Black can go over here, this. There's all kinds of moves that black could decide to play. But it's kind of the same here as well for black, right? Black says, I don't want to play away and then have white suddenly play here and pressure this. And so black adds a move here. And then white plays a move because they don't want to allow black to play something like this. So this might be a little too comfortable for black. I don't think this is super important. I would probably honestly play something like this. I might also play something like this, but I'd probably go for this one. But this is the vital point, right? Because ideally, yeah. It was a big gap. It was a big gap. Like it wasn't even close. I actually just finished telling the chat that I cheated and looked at the score earlier. But yes, I'm very happy about that victory. And now he just needs to take down Wei Bin. Or the more interesting scenario, Wei Bin takes down Leo and we get a three-way tie. Yes, it's gonna be very good. It's gonna be very interesting. Very excited. I hope I don't sleep through that match. But yeah, so we can see that white it takes away that kind of vital point. So I actually think this might be a very smart move, very intelligent move even. But also a very good fighting move. And of course, white wants to, drop down because now this is also a vital move. So if black plays away, this could feel very uncomfortable for black. So black's going to go ahead and play here. And now we don't allow our opponent to high at the head of 2. So we extend again. And now we generally shouldn't allow our opponent to high at the head of 3. But it's actually okay here. We are pretty strong at the top of the board. It's not that big of a deal. But it's something to think about here. If our opponent has the option to be able to high at the head of 2, we might want to think about extending or jumping. These are options. However, we have to also be careful, make sure we're not leaving, extra cuts. We don't want to get hot at the head of and the butt of 2 at the same time. And so black chooses to play over here. Now, I also think this is very smart because if we do keep extending, it's very possible that white plays a knight's move and white is getting too much on this side of the board. And so black says, I'll cut my losses and I will go ahead and play over here. And I accept that I will lose a little bit here by allowing black to, or white to Hane at the head of these 3 stones. I accept that little bit of loss because I'm going to go ahead and focus on this other idea. You know, it's a bit of a trade, right? And so white is very forceful with this. And so you'll notice that white actually plays away here, plays away to this side. And this is actually really interesting to note because a lot of players will come back and fix this shape. But this is Gote. This is Gote, and it's pretty obvious that if we play this way, black is going to go ahead and fix the shape here. However, what's also really good to note is that if white plays here, black will also play away. Black will also come back to this left side over here and play away. So what white says is, I really want Sente. How do I do that? So what they end up doing is they double Hane. And so what happens is if black plays away like this, white can play this Atari, which is urgent. This is an urgent Atari. So that means that it is urgent for black to extend. But it is not urgent for white to defend this cutting point. It is not urgent for white to defend that cutting point. So this allows white to be able to come back and play this pincer move and leave this little bit of weakness behind, because white doesn't care if black plays this. White would be really happy if this happens, right? Like white would just be over the moon, right? It's too good for white. And so white is playing very intelligent. Now black has to come back and make sure that this group is alive, because this stone is pretty important. We've pretty much invested in it. If we were to suddenly, you know, give this up after giving white this double Hane here, it would feel very bad, especially when we played over here instead of just extending. It wouldn't make a lot of sense if we didn't extend here and then suddenly didn't live with this, you know, this stone over here. And so black has to make sure that this lives because it's important. So this is a really good way to get ahead. We don't want to keep pushing from behind because this would just, again, this would be white too many points. It's too easy for white, just too much. So black says, I need a way to get ahead, and I'm going to go here. So now if black was to try, or if white was to try to cut right away, this is very difficult to be able to play out. It's not very easy. So white says, I'll turn, because I want to have cutting points, because if we go here now, we can see it's very easy for black to be able to connect back up to that stone. But white says cutting point, and then white blocks, and now black has to come back and fix their cutting point as well. However, cutting point, right? You see how many cutting points were left over? And so white is playing, again, very smart. However, this is looking a little scary to me. I have this group here as black that is kind of floating, and I have this group here as black that is also kind of floating. And I would feel a little bit safer as white because I think I'm more likely to live here, and I think I'm out here. So I would feel a little scared as black at this point of the game. So white Hanes to seal in. Black says, I'm going to go back in here and live. But this is where it gets complicated because white can kind of just come out here, right? Like white doesn't actually have to come back here, and white doesn't need, or black has to add another move here, right? If black, you know, like let's say black defends here, fine, we'll go ahead and respond to that, you know, but black still has to add another move over here, wherever, right? And if black does that, then white can come back here and kill, right? And so black now has to add a move over here. And so that allows white to be able to just cut here. So I feel like white is ahead at this point. So I am right. White is ahead. White is up by 1.6. It definitely feels like Leo is kind of fighting a little bit from the back foot. And I think it had to do something with this, with this fight here. I'm not sure what could have been done better, but it definitely felt very, very scary. Now, it is only a 1.6 lead for white. It's not, massive. Again, Leo is really good at keeping track of the score. He's really good at being able to, keep it really close, even in these really complicated fights. And so it's not super unexpected that he would have a decent position. Now, you'll notice here as well that white doesn't, or black doesn't keep pushing here like this. And the reason this is not good is because obviously white is getting tons of territory on the bottom. And so it's kind of like, how do we fight this? And so one way that we can actually look at this when we're playing as black is that this group can be considered a lizard's tail. So for example, if white cuts here, now I'm just going to give you an example variation, not saying this should actually happen, but let's say black plays here, and then black plays here. Basically, we can kind of just give it up. We can just say, hey, it is a big group, but I don't want it to be super complicated. Now, I think there's a better way to give it up, and I think Leo is going to show us here the better way to give it up, the better way to sacrifice it. But this is basically going to be a lizard's tail. So basically, Leo is planning, or at least I assume so. I assume that black is planning to sacrifice these. I don't imagine him actually going to try to save them. He'll probably find a way to sacrifice them. 6 versus 8 on looks not quite fair. I would say that Leo's 6 on is a bit underrated. He's technically probably 8 on as well. I'd probably say Leo is around 8 on also. If not 8 on, at the top of 7 on for sure. Oh wow, okay, that's actually a really cool move. That is a really cool move. So if we see that if black connects here, and white, or if white connects here and black connects here, then white cannot seal black in here, and so connection isn't an option. And if white connects here, then black can cut here, and we kind of get this ladder, but you can't really play out the ladder because white will lose these stones here. And so that's actually a really cool variation. That's a really cool variation. I didn't think about that one. So maybe white will actually be able to save those stones. And so white actually has to kind of bail here. But I still think this is good for white. I still think this is good for white because even if we do this, like let's say we just go out here, right? Like let's say we're just gonna go here, right? The thing is, like, I feel like as white, I could just go for the bottom. Now, obviously, that's not the way that it's gonna happen because if black plays here, black is dead, right? White would just play here, and black doesn't have any liberties. So black has to play this. So we're gonna have to see how this will change the variation to where black gets out in a really solid way, or maybe this also leads to a sacrifice variation where black still sacrifices the stones. I would still be better off having the bottom. I'd still prefer having the bottom, but that's me. Oh, that's a cool cut also. They're playing a lot of cool moves. These are definitely some really cool moves. So basically, if white was to try to come out here like this, black has a lot of forcing moves with this. So now if white plays here, black here is an Atari, and if white tries to connect, we take these stones. And if white tries to play here, then we can also take these stones, and white cannot connect. So white has to actually come out here, but now there's forcing moves. There's all kinds of forcing moves that black can get here for free. And so black is really making it difficult for, yeah, exactly, moving counter. Side of strugglers, yes, they are constantly, throwing the ball back and forth.
I do remember Joe Yup actually had some pretty really cool moves in the Chicago tournament as well. And Leo's like throwing hands. He's like, no, I've got the really cool moves. The Echo is back. The Echo is back. Hopefully, Chris heard me. Did you hear me, Chris? Yeah. And then, okay. Yeah, it'll probably fix. That's fine. It'll probably fix itself. It seems to be fixing itself every now and then. Yeah, unfortunately, we can't really do much about the Echo right now. But it should fix itself very shortly. It usually does. So, but yeah. So I think this is really good for a really good thing for Black. So Black chooses to cut here and say, I am now alive here. I didn't have to sacrifice. See, this is why Leo is 7 Dawn, and I'm like 5, 6 Dawn or something. Clear level difference. I would have sacrificed the stones. I would have never found the way to live here. Very, very, very strong. And the cool part is that White still has to actually come back here, because if White tries to seal this off, for example, Black can play the Satori first, causing White to extend here, and Black can just go back and take these 3 stones, allowing these to connect up. Now, White could, take the entire bottom like this in Sensei, but it's painful to play this way. It's very painful. So White extends, says, okay, I'll just take the giant corner. And Black says, okay, but I get access to the bottom of the board. And so very good for Black. I actually think Black is ahead now. But let's see. Black by 8.3. 8.3. So that is huge. That is very big. So this variation was very incredibly good for Black. I can understand why Leo would be walking away with some fist bumps. I would feel very pumped after variations like that. Very, very cool. And again, I think with Leo, there's a lot of I actually don't know if he can play in the American Pro Quals or the NAGF Pro Quals, but I do think that if he was to play in them, I think he has a really good chance of just easily winning. Easily winning. He is such a very promising player. Such a very promising player. Every time I watch him play. Anyway, yeah, so we can see here that White offers a trade. So he says that if you connect under and I Atari here, I'll get the outside and you get, a little bit here. Now there's obviously some Aji here, right? But Black says, I don't want that, and I just want to live in your territory. There's a lot of room down here to live, so I'm going to live. And of course, Doyep's going to fight it. Both players are going to fight this, it looks like. And so it's a ko. But again, there's a lot of room here. It's very difficult for White to outright win this. And we know that this is Sente. White can't just take this. It's not just about Black living down here, because Black can just turn here, right? Black can come back and capture these stones. And again, this would be very bad for White. And so Black can use all of these as local ko threats. Lots of ko threats. But now White has ended the ko. But now he needs to prove that Black can die down here. That is crazy. No, you cannot do this. So White says that I will trade, and this is enough. So Black has to add a move here, and it's Sente, and White gets the bottom. But this is very bad for White. This is very tiny. And so it's a Black plus 18. But here's the thing. We know this is bad. How do we know this is bad? Because we said earlier that White had the option to play here, allowing Black to Atari with here into this, right? We were aware that this could happen, and that white could take the bottom territory, right? Take the entire bottom territory. Well, obviously they wouldn't do that. They would probably do something like this, right? Or this. And this was an option. But now white isn't getting the bottom, right? They're now getting less than that. They ended up dying here in the center, and they only got a part of this. Sure, they got a little bit more towards the right side, but they end up losing more of the bottom than they ended up gaining, and they lose the entire center. Again, I just want to point out how very intelligent this is from Leo's side. He's playing very smart. You know, a lot of these moves that he played over here, all of these very strong and powerful moves he played earlier are paying off a lot. It's very strong, very good. And white and black doesn't actually have to care about coming back and catching these. I think the cherry on top is that white actually has to come back and defend. So this is very painful for white. And black doesn't even, again, you know, black doesn't have to do a lot. And you'll see that black just comes back and says, hey, I know that you're going to be looking to play this kind of move, so I'm just going to go back and defend. And so now white needs to do something. White needs to do something. And when we're looking at this board, we say, how does white win this game at all? How does white win? Well, there's still a group that isn't confirmed to be alive. Now, it's very unlikely that this will ever die, but it is the only group that is floating. Black was able to come back and fix pretty much the only weakness they had in the game, right? You know, which was here. And so as white, we're kind of at a loss of like, where do we make up these points? Where do we make up 18 points? Well, we have to attack, we have to kill this, we have to do something, right? And so it's very difficult for white. And so white is kind of going on a bit of a rampage on these groups, on this group over here, trying to invade, trying to get something back. So you can see that black Tanuki's over here. I'd imagine this is to for the Aji, for the extra strength. This would be my guess, but I'm not quite sure what white was afraid of here, and I'm not quite sure what black has there. But it does look like he's just trying to utilize the Aji. Again, we know that this is the weak shape from earlier. Okay. Okay, a little bit of Aji here in the corner now. So if black does this, white can extend here. Not too big of a deal because you're just alive as black, but it is some end game, some big end game. So white comes back to live. But at the same time, we are losing quite a bit on the bottom here as well. Oh, I thought the game ended there. I was very confused. Ooh. So here we get a free liberty. So if we extend here, we can see that we don't end up taking this liberty. So black says, if I play here, you extend, you extend. Black takes a liberty, and so now as long as this ends up in a seki, like that is really big, right? Because this doesn't have two eyes. This only has one eye here. This white group, only one eye. But also, white needs to find their liberties here. White needs to find their liberties. So it's really going to come down to a ko, but black has a ko factory on the right side. White needs to be able to live here, but also kill this in ko. All at the same time. And so this is very unfortunate for white. So very well played by Leo. Chris, do you know if their game ended? Chris. Can you hear me, Chris? No, you're fine. Do you know if their game ended? The Leo versus Doyup game. Do you know if anybody, or if it's still going? Oh yeah, yeah, you did. You right. I It slipped my mind. Okay, so very well played by Leo. We finished the commentary on that one. That was a very exciting game, and Leo looks so on point. I kind of hope he beats the Japanese player. I kind of hope he beats the 7P. It would be so big for him as a player, and especially if he's playing this well. I would love to see it. The triple, yeah, that would also be really fun too. Yes, yes, I do. Yeah. All right, we're going on a 60-second break. Okie dokie. I don't see you. I know. I was just letting you know I don't see you. But hello, everybody. We're back, or I'm back. Um, Wait, can I be heard? Am I unmuted?
Unmute this, but then I get an echo. But that should be okay. Check, check, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Nope.
There it is.
1 second, guys. We're trying to get Chris's audio to work.
Yeah, you're there now.
Okay. And now it should be quiet. Okay. All right, back to you, Paige. Take it away.
Okay, awesome. All right, we've got our last game of the day, Brady versus Zhao. Um, and we actually got it was a very fighting game here. Now I'm not going to go over the entire thing. We're kind of going to be skipping a little bit to the near the ending. It was pretty much a fight from start to finish, and Brady ended up actually winning this by resignation because his bottom group died. And we're going to take a quick look at kind of what ended up happening, how that kind of transpired, just a little bit. So we can kind of see here that at this point, it definitely looks very confusing how that position came to be, because we can see that this looks like a vast area of black territory, right? Like it's just a lot of points for black, and white is kind of stuck in this corner here. But somehow black ends up dying with these 6 stones, and I actually think it's because of this pincer. And I'm not quite sure why. Let me go ahead and check the score estimator. Maybe black feels very behind. Okay, so black does feel very behind. I'm not that great at counting, so I'm relying a little bit on the score estimator. But white is actually up by 7.5. And so I think that's why black is choosing to play this side, because I would probably actually choose to play this side. I would want to be a little bit more defensive. Um, but basically, black is planning to probably attack this, and they're probably going to try to utilize their liberties on this group here as a way to attack this white stone. Basically, if white tries to escape, it's very easy to come back and try to seal white in, and then go back to something like this, for example. Obviously, this is not what happened or what's going to happen, but that would be what my idea is. And I imagine that for white, they're probably like, if I just make life here or here, I probably have enough points. White does have a lot of solid points, so it isn't very easy. So white plays a probing move on the lower right, always good just in case. And now white's going to go ahead and try to launch an attack. Now we can obviously see here with this move, black is saying 100% these 2 stones must die. These 2 stones must die. So white has an idea of how they win the game, and black has an idea of how they're going to win the game. And so we get into this fighting again. White doesn't want to do this. White doesn't want to do this, and there's a reason we don't want to do this as white, or as black doesn't want to. Sorry, black doesn't want to do this, and we know black won't do this because they played here. So if you guys remember, I mentioned earlier, you want to be able to have a clear understanding of what your opponent's goal is, because it's going to help you decide or figure out what they're going to play. So we know that black isn't going to play this because this wouldn't make a lot of sense. White's just going to connect back, and now this move looks really useless, right? And so we know that black is going to play this move. We know that they're going to go for this cut. And so this is something to keep track of. Even if we don't know exactly how we're going to respond to it, it is at least a good idea to have an idea of what our opponent is going to play, what kind of style they're going to play, what their intentions are. And so we know at this moment as white that black is probably going to try to kill us. And so something that we can probably do, if we're not too, stuck at going out this direction, one thing that we might do here is go, my opponent just wants me to die. Maybe I should just live on the bottom of the board and be happy with that. Maybe that's enough, right? Now, obviously, that's not how it's going to go. We're probably going to see a series of cuts here. But generally, the idea is if my opponent is trying to murder this specific group, I should be aware of that. I should make efforts or knows about ways that I can live and think about our ways out before we make any commitment, right?
But I think from this point, it's very difficult for black. So white plays very smart here. White plays very smart here. There's not a lot that black can do. So if black comes back and makes life, and white Hane's here, it's very difficult for black to try to kill this now. That's why you see this move here, because black still wants to commit to the kill. But I think once white plays here, it's very difficult for black to come up with any amount of liberties. There's just not really a lot that they can do. They're always going to be very low on liberties from this point. We can see that black is trying, but for the most part, it's really difficult. So black's kind of banking on white doing something like this, and then just be like, aha, I'm just gonna capture these stones, and if you take these, it doesn't matter because I get this whole thing. But obviously, as long as we realize how many liberties we have, and we try to get that, so black plays the vital point, but white has no way of actually making up the amount of liberties that they need. And so it's very, very well played by white. But yeah, otherwise, there were tons of really interesting games today. I think the most exciting ones were Wei Bin versus Zhou Yup, and I think the Do Yup versus Leo was very exciting. And I also kind of thought the Martin versus I can't remember who he played was also a little interesting. I thought that was also a little bit of a unique game. And then the Brady game was also a little bit unique also from earlier. And I thought they were really good games. But yeah, and I think that is everything.
It is.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the studio. Let me bring that back. And we'll fade. All right. And let me get the sound. Todd will let me know if you can't actually hear me. I'm going to turn that down. So first of all, Paige, great job. Your voice is just about to give out, it sounds like.
But, it is. It hurts, actually.
Thanks for hanging in there. Just before we wrap for the day, just
sounds good.
Hold on. Okay, thumbs up from Todd. Just overall thoughts on the games you saw today, and it's always interesting when we see something like all these folks in Canada. We know some of them, but a lot of them are people we haven't seen before. Any sort of observations, thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was actually just telling the chat. I thought, I thought the Brady game was really interesting, where he played for the center. You don't really see that many people play for the center because it's really hard to hold. 10 years ago, you would have seen a lot of players trying to, build, cosmic style and everything. Now, obviously, Brady's game wasn't quite cosmic. But it was still very interesting to see him try to go for the center, and he was capable of holding the center against his opponent. His opponent was actually also really strong, and he did that. And then there was the Martin game. Some of the players that are more middle of the pack, not quite at the top, but still had really interesting games where Yongfei kind of just out territoried him and then said, "Nope, this game's over. You can't do anything." And then obviously the more exciting games between Do Yup and Wei Bin, and then my favorite game of the day, Leo versus Do Yup, where I thought Leo played probably honestly out of his mind. I think the reason he fist bumped isn't simply because he won the game, but because he quite literally played out of his mind. He played so well that game, and he played some really cool Tsujis that I didn't think of. Obviously I'm not, I'm not as strong as him, but whenever you see stuff like that, it is really incredible. And I think he played quite well today. That made me think it was an actual pro game I was watching. Well, like a high professional game.
Well, and I guess one thing I want to say, having seen Do Yup close in Chicago, where he was just an unstoppable force. Although I will say, and I'm blanking, but he played a very young player who was in a similar position.
Joshua
To
Land.
Yeah, I think he had the game and couldn't quite hold on to it. And the thing I would say about Doyup's style is that he's very, very strong, but I think he does have weaknesses. And
So
I think,
I have a very hot take about Doyup as a
bring it on,
player.
bring it on.
I think that he doesn't take the game seriously when he comes to play internationally. I don't
Really?
think that he doesn't take them seriously, but I think there are certain tournaments and certain opponents where he is very laid back and he doesn't fight with all his like level, right?
Hmm.
Um, I played him in my very first tournament. He was my very first round one opponent. He was my very first person that I played in person, basically,
Oh dear.
in a tournament, and it was very clear that he wasn't taking me seriously, and he still crushed me. Um, and I noticed the more I watch him that there are times where it's clear that he's like it's very clear to me where there are games where he's like, I want to beat this person, I really want to beat this person, I need to take this game seriously, I need to beat this person. And then there are times where he'll play weaker players and he seems more susceptible, like he seems more attackable. He's playing very aggressive in a non-smart way versus a very smart way sometimes. And so I think in some games he isn't taking them as seriously. I don't think he didn't
Hmm.
take this game, his game against Leo, seriously. I would imagine he did. It's just that I think sometimes he goes, yeah, this opponent doesn't deserve my attention.
I wonder though, he's so strong, and you look at somebody like Dohuk who he doesn't exactly wear a suit, but he dresses very properly. You look at the way that he sits, right?
Uh-huh.
This is all sort of professional training, and I think he shows up and he sees people, and you know how people show up to our tournaments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that may be part of it too. Is that he thinks maybe folks are not that strong, and I just some of the games I've seen, I think, well, maybe that's not true.
Well, he did go to Europe and win their stuff like what was it, like three or
And
four
they're
times in
strong.
a
They're
row,
strong.
and then came over here. It was probably like it's probably just gonna be the same thing here. I'm just gonna come and I'm just gonna stomp everybody.
We've seen it. Yeah. Well,
He
very
is
interesting because
according to No Reading Go, he is 1-6 against AGA 7 dons.
well, that can't be good. All right. Well, good stuff today. We are down to our last two. This is a 6-round tournament, so we'll be back tomorrow. Bill Lynn, we've saved our Canadian commentator for our finals on day 6, so where we will have some very exciting matches tomorrow. I believe our starting time will be I think it's going to be 8:30 again Eastern time. But anyway, check the e-journal. We'll have a report out and we'll let you know. Huge thanks to Paige for just a marathon performance.
Woo! Also, Bill
Make sure
used
you
to
stay
be.
hydrated, and we're going to see you again in about a month for the Pro Qual, which will be right here at
Oh,
the
that'll be
National Go
exciting.
Center. If you're in the area, come on by and watch it in person. Otherwise, you can watch it online. And a reminder that the Go Congress is coming up in 2 weeks. And again, we'll be there covering it. If you're anywhere within driving distance, come there in person. Otherwise, we will do our best to bring it to you. And there was something else I'm forgetting, must not be important. Thank you all for watching. Thanks again, Paige. We'll see you guys all next time. Take care.
Bye,
Be careful.
everybody. Take care.
Stay cool. We're out.
Bill and I Bill and I used